Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Sneha Jha. I'm the editor for ETCIO, and I'd like to extend a very warm welcome to all of you to the fourth edition of ETBFSI CXO Conclave. And we have organized this roundtable on the sidelines of the main event for all of you. The topic for today's discussion is neobanking and cloud, the digital way forward for FinTech. Now, before I plunge headlong into the discussion, let me first introduce my panelists here. They are Nirav Choksi, CEO for CredAble; Gaurav Jalan, founder and CEO mPokket; Yashoraj, Tyagi, CTO and CBO for CASHe; and Adarsh, Prabhu, Associate Director, Niveus Solutions. Good afternoon, gentlemen. Welcome to this roundtable discussion. Now, before any conversation, context is critical. So we'll start off by talking a little about the technology disruptions that are happening in the BFSI space. And one of the biggest, disruption has been FinTech and the emergence of neobanks. This technological disruption has heralded a new era for banking, and it's all set to challenge the well-entrenched incumbent players, the players that have been a little slow in responding to the changing customer demands. But with the emergence of neobanks, all that is set to change. Neobanks are here to shake off the status quo. The size of the global neobanking market is expected to hit $333.4 billion by 2026. And the pandemic has only served to accelerate the emergence of neobanks, and with emerging technologies like cloud, data sciences, ML, and various other cognitive capabilities, the neobanks are set to march ahead in the financial services space. Now, with that as the context, I'd like to start off with you, Nirav. Nirav, as a digital native fintech player, as India's largest working capital tech platform, how do you see yourself in a space? You are born in the cloud, digital native company. How do you see yourself at an advantage over the brick and mortar, well-entrenched financial services players? And how has your approach to cloud and other digital native platforms helped you achieve that required level of resilience, scalability, and security of operations?
Right. First of all, thank you for having me. I think one of the biggest benefits that we've derived from the pandemic is our ability to digitally serve SMEs through supply chain financing and through receivables financing. And the reason we've been able to scale is because the entire process has been digital. Now, most traditional incumbent players in this space do not yet have the technology infrastructure that they require to be able to serve their customers in the same way. So I think customer journey and a convenience, from a convenience perspective, from a reliability of information perspective, etc., has been a game changer where, all of us in the fintech space have been concerned. So, and you're seeing that change now come with traditional and incumbent players as well, as they start partnering with fintechs like us, either to participate on our platforms or license our platforms, or whichever way. But you're seeing that digital push come in. Obviously, we were 5 years ahead of the curve, and hence that scale has been able to show up in our business. But I think going forward, the whole world is moving towards enhancing customer experiences, and neobanking and cloud, of course, are technologies that will support that.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Nirav. So you gave us a sense of how this model really helped you scale in the pandemic, and also gave us examples of how there is a greater acceptance and how it's kind of neobanks are kind of getting into the radar of consumers. Now, I'd like to understand from you, Yashoraj, how did this technology-led business growth model stand you in good stead during the pandemic and the extended lockdown, if taking a thread from from what Nirav said, if you could give us some instances of how it has helped you reduce the time to market, achieve greater efficiencies with effective use of resources, reduce the latency. How has it helped you speed up the innovation cycle, the time to market, the time to value?
Sure. Thanks a lot for that question again. And thanks for having me here. And I think Nirav already covered, some good pointers there. What I'd say is that I divided in two parts. Obviously, you have also kind of summarized it in terms of the points that in which we can look at answering this. But very fundamentally, as a credit-led financial services company during the pandemic, there was this huge influx of customers that were never ever sort of mobile friendly when it comes to accessing finance before, because of any sort of apprehensions they have had, were just forced to come on board because the very simple act of not being able to go to your closest bank branch and do your everyday transactions made them say that, okay, fine, let me see what else we can do over here.
The first march to digital
absolutely.
adoption.
And it's crazy, like the kind of influx of customers you have had before that we had over there was never seen before. So that's one part of it. And secondly, then it brought the onus up on players like us to make sure that we have the relevant customer experience, we have the relevant platforms and the back-end technical capabilities to service this demand, to service this kind of customers with the products they actually want to take on your platform. So obviously there have been players across segments, whether it be investments, insurance, credit, that have spawned up in offering completely digital native experiences to customers. And typically what happens is that you create a base transaction layer which allows you to execute your fundamental transaction. In our case, it would be offering credit. You have the relevant partnership with the relevant banking partners, relevant transaction banking partners, relevant KYC based processes that allow you to do the same process in a matter of a couple of minutes. And then you build meta layers on top of that, which could be, say, an AI layer that you build for better credit underwriting, credit profiling, that allows you to sort of widen the scope to who you are giving that same service to. And that allows you to sort of, while you have built a platform that gives you low latency, now you have a platform that gives you a bigger distribution. So creating the base layers and meta layers on top of that is then what has enabled these same digital players to offer those same products to a larger range of customers and at the scale and efficiency at which the customers are expecting.
So Yashoraj, you've given me a very comprehensive view and these very interesting ideas on how, you spoke about the base layer and the meta layer on which you can then build up on various innovation. This is very relevant for neobanks because clearly you don't have the kind of legacy that traditional banks do. They have years of legacy, and banks like SBI and other banks like Bank of Baroda would have centuries old of legacy. So here you're starting with that tabula rasa in terms of the technology landscape. So I'd like to come back to you with questions on that, but I'd like to first understand from Natraj. You are a cross-border neobank. For a neobank such as yours, how do you build trust with the consumers? And on this metric alone, how do you compete with the traditional banks? Because they've also started to do a lot of work in cross-border transactions now. So how do you create that digital trust with customers?
Yeah, this is basically fundamental to us. So for us, we get customers all across the world. So today, yesterday when I checked, we have customers from 85 countries, right, who have signed up for a bank account or a credit card or a credit builder card or have done remittances on our platform. And so it's two parts. One is use technology to build the trust, right? So what we do is we build up a solid layer which is extremely secure, which allows which assures the customer that his data privacy is taken care of. And because we have customers from all across the world, and we also have to sort of adhere to, if it's a European customer, GDPR, if it's someone from California, CCPA, and various privacy regulations, as well as data regulations. We have the other problem that we have to comply with regulators from multiple countries. So, for example, if we are remitting money from India, we have to comply with the RBI regulations. In United States, we have to comply with regulations from the credit authority, from the feds, and everybody else. So what we did was multiple levels. We built our system to be very secure, and there we build up security in multiple layers. We have the base security layers. We have multiple audits which have, in fact, Zolve has been getting customers only. We launched just around a year back, but we already have gone through some 4 or 5 audits, and most of them voluntarily. Security audits, compliance audits, and also taken the relevant compliance certifications like SOC 2 and things like that. In addition to that, we also assure the customer that their funds are secure. Right? And customers are transacting with us. So the proof of the pudding is today, average customer transacts almost anything between I think $1,600 to $2,000 per month. Each customer transacts. That's the credit card transactions. We have some $60-70 million going in remittances just from India to US. Other corridors are different. So people are sending money to the banks. They are paying back whatever they're taking, and we also ensure that their data is safe. Their data is reported to the correct authorities, and so both through a combination of technology, submitting to audits, and being very open about what kind of audits we are having, and having the necessary guardrails, right? So we have the insurance guardrails, the fraud guardrails, compliance guardrails, which help build the trust around that.
Gaurav, now we spoke about some of the innovative ways in which Natraj has tried to build digital trust with customers. What, according to you, are the key building blocks for to enable digital experiences that can be trusted with the customers, and how are you seeing the expectation for digital trust across the customer base, demographic profiles, and geographies? And how do you see the acceptance and adoption across different stratas of society, the different geographical, how are you able to penetrate in those areas, in those tier 2, tier 3 cities, MOFAs and towns?
Thanks, Sneha. Thank you for having me. So it's a very interesting question. Actually, at mPokket, our business model is actually geared towards our primary demographic is the youth, right? So that's the segment that we deal with. And also, primarily, most of our users are in actually tier 2, tier 3 cities, right? And we are a digital only business, right? So we do not do any, and we do not serve customers offline. And we have over time seen that, customers' willingness to accept and trust your product is fairly high if you can give them a good experience, right? So I think that is what determines whether a customer will trust your product or not. It's very difficult for any customer to evaluate whether you are providing the adequate security, and what you're doing at the back end is not visible to any customer, right? I think what they see is what they're interacting with every day. So if you have a mobile app, we're an app-based company. So if you have a mobile app, does it work properly? When they submit their data and when they're speaking to, let's say they have a question, right? And they have some concern. So are they able to raise it with your company and get adequate support? I think these are the things that, build up trust in the customer's mind.
Frictionless, customer experiences.
Yes.
Helps you win digital trust with customers.
Yes, and we found that even tier 2, tier 3 cities, people are willing, if you give them that experience and you provide them with the support, they are willing to put their trust in you and use your services.
Right. Okay. Nirav, neobanks primarily position themselves on the convenience of customer experience, which is what Yashoraj and Gaurav and Natraj were also alluding to. You also talk about that innovation in the product construct to be able to provide that experience and the ease of use as well, like we discussed. So to deliver all of this, you need to invest in a lot of data science capabilities. Can you talk about some of the data-led endeavors that you've made in this direction, and how has cloud become the springboard for allowing a lot of these cognitive capabilities to provide the ease of use, the better experiences, also to be able to understand the customer better and provide personalized services?
Right. So let me give you a use case, right? Traditionally, supply chain financing or working capital financing has been about, hey, do I have an accepted invoice from a large corporate anchor as a vendor? And now can I go to whoever, a bank, someone like us, to get money against that invoice? But the world is changing. I mean, this post invoice has become more and more, I would say, common, but the need has shifted towards moving away from post to pre-invoice. So now the questions that customers are asking is, hey, look, I have a purchase order from a very large corporate anchor who I've been working with. Can you finance me against that? Or I have just delivered my goods, but the invoice will get accepted 30 days later. Can you fund me against that? Now, how do you do all of this? You obviously can't rely on, and if you're looking to do this at scale, you can't rely on manual credit underwriting or transaction data, etc., to do this at scale. So the platforms that we need to build, or which we have built, rely on how do you effectively use transaction data that you can get, and then create a model around it which enables you to do at least instant decisioning, in terms of sanction. So that's one use case. But if you think about how neobanks work, and if they're capturing transaction data from your bank account, they know what you're buying, they know what you're selling. I mean, they know where you're receiving money from, where you're paying money to. That's a lot of interesting data that they can use to enable multiple use cases. Lending being one, insurance being another, forex, remittances being third, right? So all of this data, yes, sits with banks today, but does it sit in a way that they can use it? The answer is no. But with fintechs like us, does it sit in a way that we can use it far more effectively and enable a bunch of services and products to the same customer such that he's blown? The answer is yes. So I think that's where the fundamental difference between neobanks and traditional banks, or platforms like us and traditional banks, you're seeing that kind of a rift that chasm going bigger, if I may. So I think that's really the advantage of how you use data science.
Very valid points, Nirav, and I'd like to take that thread because you've given me a very perfect segue to move to Adarsh. Adarsh, you heard the views of all the gentlemen present here. They spoke about, Nirav, for instance, spoke about how there's a difference in the approach of neobanks as compared to the traditional banks. Traditional banks have been used to doing business in a very traditional and conventional way of, working with customers. And here they are trying to hit the ground running. They are trying to, since they are the challenger banks, they are trying to challenge the status quo and come up with new practices that would really create that wow factor, the delight for customers in terms of speed, in terms of relevance, contextual offerings. All of this is not easy to achieve, especially when it is at scale, when it has to come as competitive differentiators. So to create that kind of an elbow room into the BFSI space, they need to be very technologically sound. So you work with customers on both sides of the table. What has been your experience? How different is the ask from neobanks as compared to the traditional banks, and what are some of the business problems they are coming to you with, and what are the ways in which you are helping them solve and combat those problems?
Hi. Thanks for the question. So when it comes to traditional banks, I think there's a lot of, I would say they're lagging behind. I mean, they understand that. I think most of the projects that we are doing, or solutions that we are creating with traditional banks is on onboarding customers, or allowing their customers to onboard digitally. And this has been happening with neobanks, as you said, 5 years ago. Right. I mean, they have been doing this for a very long time, and the traditional banks are coming at it right now. And
it's a catch-up.
It's a catch-up. I mean, everybody is trying to catch up with the neobanks. And before, say, a decade ago, nobody could touch them. But now the incumbents, they have become the incumbents, where they feel that pressure. I mean, it's not a shark versus shark now. It's the piranhas who are nibbling in and challenging them in their own business. I mean, they own most of it, but they still feel that pinch. And being in a traditional data warehouse, or their infrastructure, which is not as mature as the neobanks, who are digitally more advanced. I mean, they are
I was talking to the CIO of HDFC Bank, Mr. Ramesh Lakshminarayanan, and he said that the threat for me is not other competitive bank. It's actually from the big tech and the FinTech, which is very true. And it's playing out in the market.
Yeah, very true. I think the way the neobanks start, the culture that begins at the start of the company, where they are open to cloud. Right, and everybody is open to it. Whereas in a traditional bank, it takes time to convince every stakeholder, saying that
okay, we are a very long time in getting onto the cloud because of customer data concerns, regulatory concerns.
Very, very true. So they have to manage and convince everyone before, even after say a CTO takes a decision that we are going on cloud. It takes a long time to convince the board, convince everyone. Top down, that we are going to cloud, and we need to make a cultural change towards this goal. And I think that's something that is holding up their movement into cloud. Many of them have already done it, but they have not like full-fledged, like a neobank, gone on to cloud, made use of all the advantages and advances in cloud. Maybe on the data science side, I mean, they do use few of the services, and then there's always a push saying, okay, will my CISO allow it? Should I even go do that effort? I know he'll push back. So that effort,
it's that traditional gatekeeper mentality.
That is always there.
And for banks, it was, for a very long time, it was wait and watch for the cloud.
And because they didn't have a competition before, like just a decade ago.
And the stakes were also very high.
Yes. So it was like, okay, I know I have five people who will compete with me, and we are at the same stage technically. I mean, we are almost having the same back-end solution, wealth management solution as well. So you don't have that push. You didn't have that push for 10 years. Now you have the same legacy, same thinking, and it becomes very difficult to come out of that. Right. So I think that's the advantage that neobanks have it. But now slowly we see that traction in the legacy banks as well. I mean, they have understood, they have come up. Some banks are they are very aggressive in bringing new products. They do have seen not restrictions, but they do have impediments that slow them down, but they still come over it. So they do have a digital team that tells them what is right, what is wrong. They do have consultants that come on board who are good at cloud technologies, tell them how things can be moved on fast. And there is an urgency that we see with the traditional banks as well, but the digital natives are already way ahead. And it's a catch-up game, but they'll reach there, but they understand that there's a risk if they don't do it.
Right. How are you trying to meet the customer demands for seamless financial experiences when it comes to neobanks? What are some of the pain points they are coming to you with, and how are you alleviating those pain points?
Yeah. So traditionally, financial services have always been physical. I mean, you had to go to a branch to for any service that you wanted. You want to buy insurance, you still have to go to a bank. You want to take a loan, you spend a months to get a loan. But with online finance, this has changed drastically. And with customer demands, regulatory requirements, and with your advancements in technology, there's an urgency in going digital first. So giving these financial it's time that customer demands are met anywhere, anytime, anyhow. So you don't really do this from your app. I mean, there are they want to give these financial services in an embedded app system as well, where say you can think of say a travel website, right? So you can think of a travel website where you are supposed to only book your stay or book your travel, but now your financial transactions are done there. We also sell insurance through that. I mean,
embedded finance.
In embedded finance. So this is made possible through a API landscape. So with Google Cloud, there are API management platforms like Apigee, which help you embrace the embedded finance very easily. It makes it very convenient to say you have your APIs that were meant to be internal. You could expose them to your partners and enable partners to build engaging UI and then embed your services into their apps. And it makes it very inclusive. It opens new avenues for growth. And I think that is something that has been happening, or that is some kind of work that we do for Neobank very often now. So some of the payment, whether it's the payment services or the insurance services, so we enable an embedded financial inclusion so that their services could now be used by other partners, their partners, so their premier partners, and in a secure way. I think security is at the top when it comes to financial services. I think retail is way ahead of. I'm not talking about retail banking. I'm talking about retail where Amazon or Flipkart, they're way ahead in terms of innovation in digital technology. But they don't have, the restrictions or the regulatory commitments that fintechs have. So, but when it comes to banking, Apigee gives you that layer of trust, where you could expose your APIs and allow these APIs to be embedded into other financial products and provide a seamless financial service to
Right,
everyone.
and that's critical because if data is the oil, then APIs are the pipelines.
Yes.
And it's all an ecosystem play now in the financial services sector, right?
Yeah, sorry, but I would be remiss if I don't say this. I mean, think about this. Government of India is far more digitally advanced than most private and publicly listed companies in India, including financial institutions. What they've been able to do with India Stack, we don't see happening in traditional companies. So that's just one thing to put in perspective. That while we say yes, financial institutions are slow, you also have a sterling example of government initiatives like Aadhaar, like GST, UPI. And these are the rails on which people like us are building credit infrastructure, right? And we discount that.
That's really helped you leapfrog in terms of
Correct.
business model
Now,
as well. Because
think of other markets where such infrastructure doesn't exist. So, where we are today from a digital lending perspective or an underwriting perspective is far more in the future than most of our peer economies would be. And they're at least 3-4 years away. So the financial institutions today have such a great opportunity to leverage this and leapfrog as global banks, including multinational banks in India, and yet here we are. So just thought I'll put that in perspective.
Right. Now, Yashoraj, in your previous response, you spoke about how cloud is helping you build on top of innovation. Now, when one of the biggest byproduct of digital transformation is data. And when we talk about data as the oil, then cloud becomes the pipeline and AI becomes the refinery. So how are you leveraging, some of these capabilities, ML, AI, to then be able to provide a richer customer experience and the speed and all of these how are you able to deliver all of these innovations at scale?
So first of all, I would say, very well put in the way you said that cloud is a pipeline and AI is a refinery. Probably going to use that quote somewhere else. So, but what I must say is that I mean, like there's one thing to talk about using AI and ML as part of a business. A lot of people do that to drive their own company valuations and all of that. But for us, since you asked me that question, I would say that for us, AI and ML has been a centerpiece of why we started this business, because as a firm, we are specifically targeting people who are underserved, underbanked by traditional financial institutions. And for that, our premise was that can we go out and figure out an alternate way for credit scoring such people based on completely alternate data, alternate in terms of being completely complementary to the traditional financial indicators, which traditionally form your bureau score. We said that we'll go out there and figure out those data sets that are completely independent of that and score people on those data sets, extract behavioral patterns from that correlate to their future financial behavior. And that fundamentally meant doing a lot of R&D in creating those in-house AI models that are able to give you those kind of that kind of a predictive ability, which we developed over a period of 2 to 3 years, and then patented that as well, which we call as a social loan quotient, saying that how your social behavior,
loan quotient.
yes, that how your social behavior can in a way sort of predict your behavior with respect to credit or behavior with respect to taking a loan from us. So that's, and for us, our AI stack and ML stack, for that same reason, for the reason that's deployed in near real-time production capabilities, becomes a very, very important part of our business. And we've kind of it can be seen the kind of investments we have made in getting the infrastructure upgraded over time, kind of being able to support all those capabilities that we have to across all the credit platforms that we are present on as of this point of time. And not only that, we've sort of been able to provide our AI as a SaaS in geographies outside of India as well. And obviously, we are completely cloud-based. So all of this resides on the cloud using all the managed services, non-managed services that we can use. But that's been a centerpiece of, I would say, our offerings over the last 5 to 6 years.
Some interesting initiatives there, Yashoraj. Now, I'd like to move on to Natraj. Natraj, what you're trying to do is very complex, and of course, security is a very important aspect of it. It has to be baked into the process. It can't be a bolt-on because you're handling cross-border fund transfers. So, how are you leveraging AI, intelligent automation, and cloud analytics to be able to provide secure systems that are fast and can also thwart the cyber attacks?
Right. Very good question. We do it in multiple levels. One is obviously the serving systems, the systems through which expose the APIs through that. The second is also the data, right? And when you look at the security landscape, there is the external threat, there is the internal, and a lot of it can be need not be willful. So where we start, I'll start with the data part of it, right? So one thing which cloud gives is that you can actually set up data lakes and lake houses very quickly. But it's very important, because we are in this FinTech business, that it has to be secure. It has to be very well governed. It has to be auditable. Any single modification which happens to the data needs to have a complete lineage, right? Only people who need to look at the data should look at the data. Not all employees should be able to look. Certain data, no one should be.
Access control, identity
access
management.
control, identity management, discovering where
because that's the new perimeter now.
Right. Discovering where the data is, right? You can actually dump a lot of data, but you may not know that some very critical data is lying in a blob. And so how do you even discover that? We use a lot of AI tools. Initially, we started with just rule-based systems to figure that out. Then we figured out, okay, this data, because we are getting data from so many sources, it's very difficult to just use regex patterns to figure out where the data sits. So a great part of our security effort went in securing the data. And we had an additional complexity that our data doesn't sit in a single data center. There is a lot of data localization requirements. Certain data needs to be sitting in a certain country. So not only you have to secure the data, you have to create a perimeter for the data, you have to have very, very strong data governance and discovery and sort of quality testing. But also you cannot mix data. Right? So data which is generated from bureaus in the United States have to sit there. Data which we are getting through open banking APIs in a certain country has to sit in that country. So our first challenge was how to manage this data and not mix the data. Even though Zolve itself owns all the data cannot actually move between data centers, and still create an analytics layer where the decision makers can take business decisions based on all the data. You cannot have siloed decisions around that. So that was the first challenge, and we worked towards that.
How did you work towards it? Because it's quite a tricky problem to have.
Right. We actually built up our own lakehouse. Right. So we started with using data warehouses, which are provided, but then we realized that this is something that we are dealing with, which is fairly new. So we built our own lake houses, and our internal lake houses have these access controls. So as the data comes in, there are data quality checks, data security checks which happen. Then we have data governance layers, data audit layers, right? Even when the data is being queried, who has access around that? You cannot download data. Even the data science models, you have to run it on the cloud. You cannot download data into your laptops around that. So even if you're running a Python notebook, all the processors actually run on the cloud. It doesn't come to your laptops or desktops and things like that. And then we segregated out which data, label the data, that this is PII, this is sensitive PII, and this is US data, this is India data, this is Europe data, and ensure that the systems ensure that they don't move. If it is marked that this is local to this country, this will never move. So we have, in reality, we have multiple data lakes which are sitting in multiple data centers, and we manage that. And then the access layer. So certain data, say aggregates, are fine, but detail about the documentation being moved is not fine. So and that's where the challenge is, that you can obviously you can have the you can go overboard on the security part of it, but then you cannot take business decisions out of that data.
Correct.
So the next challenge was that even though these were separate data lakes, how do you take business decisions which actually merge the data? So there we figured out how, in our ETL pipelines itself, how do you aggregate the data and who can see these aggregates, and we then ensure that these aggregates do not leak any PIIs, which do not leak any, you do not pull any data which is specific to a country's jurisdiction or something like that. And so it was a fairly complicated system, which, but we had to do that. We had no other options around that. From the API security and the app security part of it, we use a combination of both three things actually. A traditional multi-layer security approach. Where we have the perimeter security with rate limits and all DDoS protection, bot protections, and things like that. And that we use in multiple layers. It's at the edge, it's at my service mesh level, and at every service level. Then what we do is, and this is interesting, is what we do is that we do anomaly detection for every single call which comes into our system. Anomaly detection on the pattern of APIs which is being called, and also what data is being passed back and forth in that API. If there is an anomaly, it comes up in my real-time and we real-time dashboards, and we action on it. So this is completely on a learning-based system. You cannot do rules on this. So the learning-based system actually figures out anomaly. We may not know what is the pattern. It's a fallacy to sort of figure out, okay, I have made a perfectly secure system. There doesn't exist a perfectly secure system, right? So what we figure out is that this is the pattern. Is there an anomaly in this pattern? If there is an anomaly, it might be a good actor, but we still look at it. And if we figure out it's something, and we have seen patterns, and these systems have let us. The third is we actually use a lot of external red teams. We allow them to attack our system. We really pay them to attack our system from outside. And they submit reports to us that this is a point where we could actually get in, or this is around that. So we use these three kinds of around that. And in addition to that, the traditional things, for example, we never use store a password or secret in any code or something like that. We have the entire code pipelines, entire container pipelines, and everything is all, every step there is a security. So whenever there's a deployment happening, not only the tests happen, the functional test happen, the security scan happens for every single container, every line of code. So those are 101s that has to happen. But in addition to that, we use this multi-parameter, we use AI to figure out anomalies, and then we have testing done. We regularly try to figure out if there is a vulnerability in the system, in the app, and try to fix that around that. Because and we do it at a regular interval, because what happens is that we move very fast, and while moving, there's something which is secure just 2 months back may not be secure today. So that's where so it's a fairly dynamic approach which we have adopted.
Right. Sounds pretty holistic too. Right. So, Gaurav, can you talk about how you are creating that structure for a security framework? How are you making it homogeneous across the cloud models, and how are you really approaching security? Because you said that you deal with customers in the tier 2, tier 3 sectors. How do you make sure that even the most gullible of customers doesn't tend to end up making a security breach, or and doesn't end up harming themselves through by inviting a security issue?
There are two levels of security, I guess, in the way you asked your question. So one is, when the customer is interfacing with your application,
the inside out and outside in approach to security.
Yeah. So any system that is designed needs to take care of each layer, right? And I think the approaches are similar. I mean, this is not. It's a well-researched field, and there are tools out there, there are approaches out there like vulnerability testing and things like that, right? So I think the key is to use the best practices that are there and actually implement them. I think that is where the slip often happens, where security does not take precedence, and therefore there is a potential for breach and misuse, etc. And security is also, I mean, there again, one is there are outside actors who kind of are trying to breach your system. But then there's also, all of us, any company will have employees, right? So, I mean, you have to be very careful there as well in terms of, as Natraj was saying, like what data does somebody have access to? It has to be on a need basis. There have to be maker-checker systems. There have to be audit trails. There have to be logs. So I think these are all the basics of security, and these have to be put in place. And there are ways, again, I think a lot of us are regulated entities. So again, for example, we're regulated by RBI. RBI mandates, there's something called a CISA audit that you have to go through. They have certain ways in which you need to store data, in the way which you need to audit the data, store logs, etc. So I think, the practices are all there. It's just about implementation and being conscious about security. Again, as multiple members have said, there's no way to design a foolproof system. No one's ever done it. If somebody really wants to kind of break into your systems, they're smart enough people.
As good as locking your house and then hoping that the miscreant will move to another less softer target.
Exactly. So I think the objective is to make it as difficult as possible and kind of stay one step ahead. So it's obviously an evolving field, right? I mean, you put the gates and there are better locksmiths who are out there. So there's no end. It's kind of a continuous race, yeah.
Now, you heard the gentleman here talk about the security concerns. You also heard Yashoraj talk about how he's leveraging AI, and also, Natraj spoke about some of these initiatives and also the security approach that they're taking. Now, while there is no specific playbook for success when it comes to adopting a cloud-first model, what are some of the things that organizations should do to get it right, to then increase the chances of success with the cloud-first model? And what have been some of the best practices that you've seen neobanks adopt in this area?
Okay. This is a question that we come across, especially when things fail. Okay, what should I do to get things better? I mean, I decided that I have to go cloud first, but things are not going well. So there are few things that we as an organization think that NBFCs, neobanks, or any traditional bank should follow before when they go for a cloud first approach. I think I also briefly touched upon this in my earlier point, where I think getting all the stakeholders aligned with this vision is the key to going cloud first. It's not just IT who decides it needs to be cloud first. Everybody, top to bottom, needs to be aligned with this vision and needs to be aligned with things that needs to be done to go cloud first. Why should we do it? When should we start doing it? When should we select cloud over on-premise? I think that's key. I think getting all the stakeholders and making them take ownership of this decision, I think that's very good. Otherwise, you get questions like, you told we'll go cloud, what happened? It doesn't work. I mean, that's not how it works. I think everybody should be on board.
Delivering the goods is critical.
It's everybody's responsibility in the org. And this is across neobanks and even traditional banks. And the other thing is the cultural fitment. I mean, you can't have people who have traditionally worked in your bank with the same mindset and ask them to build cloud native apps. You need to upskill them. You need to make them change their mindset. Because if you think about it, the building, deploying, and maintaining of on-premise is completely different from how it happens in cloud. I mean, you might call this that person at the same role, but the tasks that he'll be doing on cloud versus what he would have been doing on-premise is completely different. You can't have the same person do that unless he upskills himself. So I think having that cultural change, having that change in mindset, that is very important when you try to build a cloud-first approach for your organization. And there are other smaller things. I think things like, I think when it comes to development, we believe in building apps that are cloud native. You don't need to start this when you're going to cloud. You can start building applications that are cloud native even when you're on-premise. So you make your applications cloud ready. And what this builds is it builds a culture within the organization where you're creating apps that can run on-premise. It can run on any cloud. Tomorrow you decide you don't want to do with one cloud provider. It helps you build, just move the application to another cloud seamlessly. And that is what is required. I mean, the way you develop apps, you need to change it such that, okay, you whether you do it on-premise, you do it on cloud, you have to build cloud native applications. I think these are some of the key points, I think, which help organizations become successful when they go the cloud first step.
Right. Now, gentlemen, you heard Adarsh talk about some of the challenges that customers have discussed with him. Now, from your experience, if you were to start all over again in retrospect, when you think of your cloud journey, what would, when you think back, what is the one thing that you would have done differently, and what is the one big piece of advice you would have for other players that they should bear in mind? Something that, often kind of gets lost.
The journey at Zolve is pretty recent, so I don't think we have the lineage to look back and things like that.
But anything that you think you could have done better? Any lessons that you've internalized?
A couple of things. One is the build versus buy. In the past, we have done a lot of decisions where we should have used available resources on the cloud, right? Certain APIs, certain services, and that necessarily that would have helped us launch faster or do things. Yeah. The one good thing we did is, in general, we build systems which are fairly cloud agnostic, in a sense that it can actually run on a AWS cloud, and you want to run in a. So in my past org, we used to run massive workloads parallelly on 2 different cloud providers, and it used to be the same service. Different, basically with Geo, we are serving. Used to run on different. So that's a good thing we internalized, that it's not necessary that you'll be able to get the exact that same cloud provider in the geography you want to serve, and you should be able to sort of move that. And second is, wherever available, and this is something we use the services that helps launch faster. And even though it may not be the exact fit, what we figured out that if we work closely with the cloud provider or the we are able to actually get a lot of things done. Case in point, in the example I was talking about was actually Google Maps. So we used to use Google Maps, and we used to run our own maps. And so a lot of things around that. So not exactly from Zolve, but these are a couple of things. Yeah. So.
Nirav?
Well, I should ask my CTO and this question, but let me take a stab at it. I think one thing that worked very well for us is we worked very closely with our cloud provider when we were designing the architecture. So we knew that we were going to use their cloud, and so that helped a lot. And that when you're a startup organization or you're a small company and you're trying to build something, getting expertise and help from professional companies who've been there and done that, like Adarsh here, helps. And I think that's one thing that we realized worked very well. Also, as the organization, and now I'm talking from a new age company perspective, but as the organization matures, it's always good to bring in specialist roles for security, for cloud architecture, etc., which we've done in the last couple of years, because then that gives you the flexibility to scale your operations globally. So I think those 2 things have worked really well for us. Technically, what could we have done differently? Probably I'm not the best cookie to answer that question.
So
but
how do you see cloud in your going forward in your technology roadmap? How do you see cloud becoming a crucible for innovation? How do you see it advancing your innovation journey, if you could?
Well, we're a cloud-only business, right? I mean, so as we build more and more products, as our products scale, as the data that we capture grows, you would need to ensure that your cloud infrastructure is built in a way that it supports scale without any sort of downtime.
So like also, an enabler to your business growth.
Correct. So even as you do geographical expansion, I think the same issue comes about. I think both Natraj and Adarsh made good points about being cloud agnostic, and we've built our platform from day one at least to be cloud agnostic for a few clouds that were existing at that time. So I think those 2 things have really helped where we are concerned.
Thank you, Nirav. Gaurav?
So what we have done differently, I think one thing is, trying to keep it simple, right? I mean, I think that is probably one thing we would have done a little differently, where in certain instances we made decisions where, the architecture ended up being more complex than was required, because let's say in a certain example, we're trying to save cost, right? And on the cloud, I mean, every cloud provider has a lot of like managed services and native functionality. So it's always a choice, right? I mean, if you want to be very agnostic, then ideally you would build everything without using the native functionality and managed services. Flip side of that is that there are a lot of hidden efforts and costs that come with that, because you need to manage a lot of things on your own then, right? So these trade-offs are there. And I think depending on what stage the company is at, you would make a decision on, whether to just keep it simple, use most of the native functionality, or try and do more things yourself. But then you should have the bandwidth and the technical talent to manage that, right? So I think that is a trade-off. And I think early on, when any company is like smaller, I think it probably makes more sense to be more native and keep things simple. And then as you grow, I think you're able to kind of, build larger teams, attract more talent, have enough, bandwidth on your side to do some of these technically more complex things that give you certain other advantages and, help you save costs and things like that, which become more important as you scale, right? So I think that's our perspective.
Would you like to add to this?
I think I like
What have you
that. I mean, I think I like the point that he made around keeping it simple. I think that is something that helps you scale. I mean, keeping everything simple and keeping everything same. I mean, the more freedom you give to use different technology, it makes it more complex, and the new person coming in is in a mess. So decide what services are you going to use, and cloud gives you that freedom.
Ready.
Yeah, cloud gives you that freedom. I mean, you can plug and play. You can, I mean, before you begin using a service, it helps you. I mean, on-premise comes with capital expense, and what cloud gives you a freedom to test something. And then if you fail or if you don't find an advantage, you can move to another compute service. I mean, each of the cloud providers come with different things that can do the same, that can provide you the same service, right? I mean, when it comes to compute, you get Kubernetes, you get serverless, you get compute instances, you get many options, and they allow you to test it. You don't like it, you move on to something else, which you didn't have with on-premise. I think that keeping it simple, I mean, selecting the right thing that suits you and keeping it simple, I think that is key. And anyways, you can move, you can move to new technologies quite easily there.
Right. I think we can go on and on with this conversation, but there is a time constraint. So I think I'd like to wrap up this session. Thank you so much, gentlemen. It was wonderful listening to your insights and your real world perspectives on the cloud first approach that you've adopted for your business model. We tried to cover a lot of ground. We spoke about how you're aiding and supporting your business models with the cloud first approach, the born in cloud approach. Some of you shared instances and success stories of faster innovation, achieving growth, scale with cloud. We also heard how it's really helped you navigate the uncertainties during the pandemic and the extended lockdown. We heard of some of the success stories in the area of new and emerging technologies and how you've been able to latch on to those opportunities really fast with cloud, some of the complex business models that you have and how cloud supports all of those. We spoke about the security challenges that your organizations face, and there how you've been able to find a workaround with data issues and APIs and all of those things, securing all of those avenues that could then bring in security threats within your organization. We also spoke about the best practices that you have adopted and you would like to suggest to other organizations in their cloud first journey. We got perspectives from Adarsh on what he's hearing from his customers, what approach he suggests to them. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for contributing to this conversation. It was wonderful talking to you, and it was a vibrant exchange of ideas. I think we should have gone on and on with this conversation, but I'm afraid you would like to attend other sessions as well. Thank you so much, gentlemen. Thank you, all of you. Thanks.